The room was glowing with lights, flags from every corner of the world for Med Stage. Reporters whispered, cameras blinked red. This wasn't just innocent. This was the Global Unity Forum 2025, aired live to millions. Presidents, kings, billionaires, and generals filled the hall. Suddenly, the crowd stirred. Donald Trump, back in the spotlight, stepped up to the podium. His presence alone made the cameras snap to life. The room tensed. Everyone listened. Then came the jab. Some countries, Trump smirked, are always asking for help, but what have they built themselves? Africa needs less pride and more results. The hall laughed. Even some African delegates looked down in shame. Trump was winning the crowd. Every sentence he hit like a punch. But at the back of the room, one man didn't move. His eyes calmed it sharp, watched everything. Captain Ibrahim, true, young, poised, silent, hadn't blinked. He didn't smile. He simply stood. And in that moment, the world didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The camera panned across the room. Smiles, nods, even applause. Trump's grin widened as held into the microphone. Burkina Faso, great people, but what's their economy based on? Hope. Morlota. A senator chuckled. A tech CEO whispered, he's brutal. Then silence Bess, a figure had risen. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood tall in his dark green uniform. No notes in hand, no microphone yet, just presence. His eyes scanned the room. Not in anger, but in sadness. He didn't move fast. He didn't raise his voice, but something about him pulled Devian, and Trump paused. Ibrahim, he muttered with forced politeness. You have something to say. The room leaned in. Reporters adjusted their cameras. Traoré finally stepped forward. There was no script, no teleprompter, only a heartbeat and a microphone. Then Kameha's voice, deep, calm, quiet. You speak of results, he said, looking directly at Trump. May I ask just one question? A flicker of confusion passed over Trump's face. One question, he repeated. Yes, Traoré replied. But please answer it honestly. The world leaned closer. You could hear a pin drop. Captain Trump placed Bothan on the podium. The silence stretched. Trump crossed his arms. Then came the question that Mr. Trump. He began slowly. If everything Africa has is nothing, why has the world spent centuries taking it? The air cracked. Gasps echoed through like thunder. Even the translators paused. Trump's smirk dropped. His face stiffened. For a second, he looked cornered, not by a gun, not by an army, but by a truth so raw it scraped Thozo. Cameras zoomed in on his face. He blinked rapidly. A flicker of fury flared in his eyes. Traoré didn't move, didn't gloat. He simply waited for an answer, but none came. Trump jotted. He reached for the microphone, but his fingers trembled. That's when the world knew this moment was historic. The silence was louder than any speech. Then Trump snapped. You think you're clever, he barked, voice rising. You don't know what you're talking about. Traoré didn't flinch. He had struck a nerve, and the world was watching. Ice-white tears forming in some, goosebumps rising in others. Something real had just happened. Something the world couldn't unsee. The room stood still. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. A journalist dropped his pen. Some leaders blinked, stunned. Others looked down, ashamed. Trump didn't speak. Not yet. His face twitched, his lips moved, but no words came out. The question had hit deeper than anyone expected. Not just because of its truth, but because no one had ever asked it like that. Calm, raw, honest. One of Trump's aides reached for a notepad. Another whispered, say something. But what could he say? He had mocked a continent. He had laughed. And now he was being asked to explain centuries of plunder in front of Thor. Captain Traoré didn't gloat. He stood with quiet dignity, hands clasped, eyes steady. The camera zoomed in on Trump. His smirk was gone. And as millions watched live across Africa, a grandmother in Ghana wiped a tear. A boy in South Africa leaned forward. An old veteran in that boy is brave. The question wasn't just for Trump. It was for the world. And it was far from over. Trump gripped the microphone. You people, he started. voice tight. You always blame others. Always the victim. His voice rose. Africa had kings. Africa had resources. What did you do with them? Gasps echoed. Cameras captured. Blink. Every word. Trop didn't flinch. He leaned slightly forward. Calm as ice, sir, he said. We had King Sunto. The world sent guns and took their... Trump's eyes widened. His mouth opened, then shut. For a moment, he looked small. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Africa Speaks and Betray Truth trended worldwide. A Nigerian student posted, he didn't shout, he didn't fight. Buth broke Trump with a question. Back in the summit hall, a delegate from Sweden stood up and applauded. Slowly, a few others joined. Trump slammed his hand on the podium. This is a trap. You set me up. But no one was listening anymore. They were watching Traoré, and the world, for once, was listening to Africa. Not through statistics, not through pity, but through powerful, painful truth. And this was just the beginning. After the summit went to break, the cameras cut, but whispers didn't stop. In a quiet back room, Traoré sat alone. His hands trembled slightly now, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. His aide entered quietly. Sir, you shook the world. Traoré didn't respond. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded photo. A village burned fields. His mother standing barefoot holding his baby sister. This, he said softly, was my home, until foreign soldiers came. He folded the photo back. I wasn't attacking him. Traoré said, I was speaking for them. Meanwhile, on news screens across the world, headlines burst. Captain from Burkina Faso silences Trump. The question heard round the world. Is Africa finally being heard? But none of those headlines showed the pain behind Traor's strength. They didn't show the boy who had buried friends before turning 10, or the man who had told the country still healing. And now this man had stood up to the most powerful voices in the world, with nothing but truth. He didn't need applause. He needed justice. And the world was now watching. Backstage, as journalists shouted questions, and analysts debated on TV, Traor's phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. It was a voice message from his mother. She had watched the summit on a tiny cracked phone in a dusty courtyard in Ouagadougou, surrounded by neighbors. Her voice trembled. My son, your words touched our hearts. Even the old men here disagreed. They said you made them feel like men again, like we still matter. Tro swallowed hard. He closed his eyes. She continued, but be careful. Ibrahim. You know how they get when truth makes them uncomfortable. Speak, but stay alive, my son. He clenched the phone in his hand. That was the cost of truth. Across the globe, debates were erupting. Some praised him, others called him dangerous. And somewhere in Washington, powerful men were already meeting behind closed. But back in that tiny courtyard, under the African sun, mothers cried for joy. For the first time in years, they felt seen, not as beggars, not as aid cases, but as humans with a stolen history, and a son who finally spoke it out loud. In a private suite above summit floor, Trump paced like a caged lion. His tie was loose, his hair messy. Two aides stood frozen near Theodore, unsure whether to speak. Trump slammed his hand on the glass table. You want that clip taken down everywhere? No, but it was already too late. Within 2 hours, the clip of Troll's question had 50 million views on TikTok and Instagram. Twitter had broken its own traffic record. Even Fox News couldn't spin it. Trump's rage grew. Who the hell does this kid think he is? Another aide hesitated. Sir, with respect, he didn't yell, hadn't even insult you. Trump turned slowly. That's exactly why they love him, he spat. He embarrassed me with Alivan, raising his voice. Down below, in the lobby, people were taking photos with cardboard cutouts of Traoré. Up here, Trump seethed, feeling something familiar, vulnerability. Because for the first time in years, Hewant, the one controlling the room, and the world was listening to someone else, someone younger, someone African, someone who reminded people of truth he'd spent centuries ignoring. That night, True returned to his hotel room, silent, drained. The lights of New York glowed outside the window, but his men drifted elsewhere, to a dusty hill in Burkina Faso, to the year he turned 9. He remembered standing in front of his school, flames tearing through the roof, books burning to ash. Foreign mercenaries had raided the area. They weren't even from his country. I remembered hiding under his desk as men shouted in French and Russian. I remembered the teacher, an old man, stood between the children and Thaganmen, and didn't survive. That day, he learned what power looks like when it has no soul. And that's why today he speaks carefully, not to attack, but to protect. He whispered to himself, I didn't come here to win. I came here to remind them that we bleed, too. He sat on the edge of the bed, opened 80's worn notebook, and began writing gagging, not a speech, but a letter to the children watching, to the little boys in Africa who wonder if their voice matters. They were the reason he spoken. If he had to face the world's fury for it, so be it. By morning, the streets of Washington, D.C. had changed. It started with just 6 students, 3 African-aim and dot. They stood silently outside the summit gates, holding signs with a single word, why? By noon, the crowd had grown to thousands. Placards read, we are not weak. We were wounded. Africa speaks. Are you listening? They didn't scream. They didn't burn anything. They simply stood like Trey had, calm, quiet, unshaken. Major networks began showing live feeds. One old black veteran stood with tears streaming down his cheeks. Fought for this country, he whispered, but today, I'm standing for that young man. Inside the summit building, True watched the footage. For the first time since the speech, he smiled. Butyl swear, high-ranking officials, this, a truth, told without anger, had become more dangerous than a protest with fire. Meanwhile, Trump tweeted, this African kid is a joke. Weak countries produce weak minds. The tweet backfired. By nightfall, over 3 million people had shared a single replay. Then why are you so afraid of his question? The world was waking up and no one could stop it now. A knock at Traor's hotel room door. It was a summit receptionist. Her eyes red. This arrived for you, sir, she said softly. An envelope handwritten. Inside a note from a 9-year-old girl, Nami Damani, living in Brooklyn. Dear Mr. Ibrahim, my mom is from Congo. She works 3 jobs. People make fun of her. Richard, I saw you on TV. You didn't show, but you made the room quiet. You looked like a superhero. I told my mom he went to be like you. She cried and hugged me. Thank you for standing up when no one else did. Attached was a crayon drawing. Amani standing beside a tray, holding a sign that read, Africa Matters. He stared at it in silence. This was why he came. Not for applause, but for Amani. For kids who still wonder if they matter. For people woes. Dignity had been crushed too long. He folded the letter carefully, like Azakard thing. And for the first time in years, his eyes welled with tears. Let them come for me, he whispered. Booty will never sit down again. That night, at 2:13 a.m., Trey received a private visit. A man in a suit, American, no smile. He didn't introduce himself. He sat without permission and leaned forward. You made noise. The kind of noise that makes governments uncomfortable. TRO. Re said nothing. You could lose funding, contracts, even peace deals. You might go home to more war. Fan before. Still silence. Then came their owl threat. A plane crash, a poison drink. These things happen in your part of the world, don't they? For a full minute, neither moved. Then Trey stood calm, cold, direct. And in your part of the world, he said, truth gets buried under gold and power. The man chuckled. You think the people will save you? Trey's voice was barely above a whisper. They already have. And with that, he opened the door and waited. The man left, but the room stayed heavy. Trey locked the door behind him, sat down, and looked out over the sleep. He was no longer just a captain. He had become a voice to big Tozalants and the world. It was only just beginning to hear him. In the green room, before his next summit speech, Ibrahim Traoré sat in silence. Outside, journalists crowded the hallway. His aide handed him his jacket, but the sleeve caught, revealing a deep scar on his left arm. The aide paused. Is that from Traoré? Nodded slowly. Yes, I was 16. He hadn't told this story in years. The militants had stormed his town, foreign-sponsored, carrying weapons not made in Africa. His uncle had tried to hide Thibois. Ibrahim refused. They wanted to teach us a lesson, he whispered. So they teed us up, and they carved words into our arms. He pulled his sleeve back down. Mine said silence. The aide's eyes welled up. And yet today, Tro nodded. Today I speak. At that moment, a journalist outside shouted, Captain True, how do you stay calm in the face of hatred? He stood, adjusted his jacket, and whispered, because they already tried to kill me, but they failed. Now I live for those who can't speak at all. And with that, he stepped onto the stage again, not as a survivor, but as a symbol. 3 days later, CNN organized a global town hall. To control the damage, Trump agreed to go live, unfiltered, uncensored. The host asked him directly, do you regret mocking Africa's the chimp? Trump leaned forward. No, because the truth is stay a week. If they weren't, wouldn't have had to babysit them for decades. Gasps. Live. The host winced. But Captain Traoré, that kid's cleaver, Trump snapped. But let's be real, he's not a leader. He's a moment, a trending topic. Suddenly, the feed split screened. On the other side, Captain Trout, joining Liv from Washington. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked into the camera. Mr. Trump, he said calmly, you once said, Africa needs to earn respect. But tell me, when your own people stormed your capital, did that earn respect? Trump froze. The host blinked. You mock us for struggling. But world watched your house burn from inside. Trump stood abruptly and walked off camera, ripping off his mic. The broadcast went silent for a moment. Then the internet broke again. Tro retrue. He walked away. This wasn't just politics now. This was she's story. The next morning, as Trooper prepared to fly back to Burkina Faso, security tightened. Whispers of threats. Unconfirmed chatter, they said. At the airport, a small crowd gathered. Supporters, children, even American veterans, came to shake his hand. Just before boarding, a teenage boy pushed it through the crowd. Captain, he shouted breathless. Wait. Security stepped forward, but Traoré waved him down. The boy handed him a crumpled letter. It's from my dad, Hesed. He was a soldier in Liberia. Hesed, to give you this. TR opened it on the plane. We fought on your soil. We left scars. I see your courage now, and I feel shame. I hope you forgive us. Keep speaking even when it hurts. A former U.S. Marine folded it gently, placed it in the same pocket as Amani's drawing. Then just as the plane began to taxi, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Sir, there's been a last-minute tech clearance request from CNN. They want a final word from you before you go. He looked out at the clouds rising. Let 'em wait, he whispered. This story, icily halfway told. 1 week later, Trey turned quietly to Burkina Faso. No red carpet, no cameras, just dust, sun and the sound of children laughing in the distance. He made his way to a rural village school, one still without a proper roof. Desks were cracked. Thedekar used chalk on a broken board. Still, the children smiled. They didn't know much about politics, but they had seen his face. They had heard their parents whisper, "That's Theon, who stood up for us." He stepped inside the small classroom. A little girl raised her hand. "Sir, is it true?" UAU asked a question that scared a big man. The room giggled. Traoré smiled gently and knelt beside her. "It wasn't to scare him," he said softly. "It was to wake him up." She thought for a moment, then whispered, "Will you ask more questions?" He looked around at their eyes, bright, wide, full of hope. "Only if you promise him something," he replied. "What?" "Promise me you'll never stop asking." They nodded, one by one. In that broken classroom, something sacred stirred. This was why he fought. 2 months later, the world invited Captain Traoré to address the United Nations General Assembly in New York. This time, the hall was silent before he even spoke. No gears, no whispers, just anticipation. He walked slowly to the podium. He didn't bring papers. He didn't bring notes. Only a folded drawing from Amani in Brooklyn, and a scar on his arm still visible beneath his sleeve. He looked out at the world. "I'm not hereditary to ask for help," he began. I'm heard to ask for honesty. And Africa is not a wound. It is a scar that keeps being reopened, not by our people, but by those who built towers with what they took from us. The room was still. You called us poor, but we are rich in spirit. You called us broken, but we are still standing. His voice cracked. Every child that goes to school under African roof deserves the same future as yours. Some delegates cried. Even hardened diplomats bowed their heads. And when he finished, the entire chamber rose in silence. A standing ovation, no doubt of duty, but of deep, painful truth. The clip of that speech broke every record. 1 billion views, 120 languages. People around the world cried watching it, some for the first time in years. Trump, now mostly silent, never responded again, but the world did. A humanitarian group built a village school. Traoré visited. Amani's letter was displayed in a New York museum, and children from Kenya to Canada began to ask the same question Heons asked. If Africa has nothing, why do you keep taking from it? One morning, standing in his uniform at a hilltop in Burkina Faso, Traoré stared into the horizon. He was no longer just a leader. He was a mirror to the world's conscience. His phone buzzed, and a third letter. This one, from a 10-year-old boy in Haiti. Thank you. You made me feel proud to be brown. Traoré smiled. The world had changed. Not from war, not from shouting, but from a single quiet question. One that couldn't be ignored more. If this story touched your heart, if Captain Traoré's courage moved you, if you cried even a little, please like, subscribe, and most importantly, drop a comment below. What would you ask the world if you had known chance to speak? Let's flood history with voices, love, and power. Let's keep this question alive so Theward never forgets again. Thank you for watching.